So let's head down to Kev, and he's
Lovely, thanks,
at the
Johnny.
Miller
Well, I'm down
exhibition.
here with a man who has got some absolutely exquisite machines parked up behind him, all under the name of Henry Miller, which, Bobby Green, was a name who is synonymous with just incredible automotive design.
He is. Harry Miller was a true genius based in Los Angeles, of all things. Not many people heard of Harry Miller because all he did was build race cars. But everyone's heard of Bugatti, right? Well, Bugatti copied Miller. He bought a Miller car, and that's what became the Bugatti. So Harry Miller thought differently than most people. He thought of simplicity, he thought of beauty, and he created cars that were absolute works of art. Every piece on the car completely handmade and designed by Harry Miller and his team.
And what we have behind us here as well, let's not be confused, these aren't replicas, these are original cars that are just in perfect condition because guys like yourself have looked after them.
Yes, I'm in the Harry A. Miller Club, and we're very dedicated to keeping this alive. The great thing is all of Harry Miller's blueprints and patterns still exist. So if a part is needed, a casting can be made, machining can be made to the blueprints and brought back into service. So that's what saved a lot of these Miller cars. There's not that many out there, and very few in their original state. And we have a couple pretty good examples here. This is my Miller on the car hauler. That was Ralph De Palma's last race car. He retired in '36 and sold the car. And now Harry Miller concentrated on oval track racing, the Indy 500 being his key goal. And he was an early competitor of Duesenberg. Him and Duesenberg were in the early 20s, were battling it out. But Harry Miller found a way to defeat him, and they never came back again. And Harry Miller, the lineage of their motors, and you've heard of the Offie motor, the Offenhauser. So after Miller retired, his chief mechanic, Fred Offenhauser, took over and renamed it the Offie. Well, this Miller-designed engine dominated the Indy 500 from, say, 1925 into the mid-'80s until the Ford Cogsworth came along.
That's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, an engine to span that time, or the design, or the kind of theory behind it to span that length of time is crazy.
It's absolutely crazy, but he did it, and they achieved it through meticulous machine work. I need to show you some of these engines. They look like pieces of jewelry, and that is why they ran so well.
And there's one that we were chatting about yesterday, I think the number 54 car, which is the one that has the supercharger right behind the engine block there.
Yes. So these two cars, the Bose and the 35 car, this was a kind of a scheme that Tucker had come up with. Tucker went to Henry Ford and he said, listen, this guy Harry Miller's a genius. Why don't we make a Miller Ford car to compete in Indy? You put a Ford flathead engine in it, and you're guaranteed to win the Indianapolis 500. And Henry Ford, he wanted to win racing, so he said, let's do that. So they built 10 of these cars. And it was a mad rush to get them done. They never even tested them. They got to the Indy 500. They all failed because the exhaust was too close to a steering joint and it froze up and they had to go out. Well, the 54 car later in 1941 got a different engine put in it. It got a Miller Ed Winfield V8 V16 engine with a supercharger, and it did real well. I think it finished third that year in 41 at Indy 500. So guys would take the cars after they all failed, and they would put better engines in them. They took the Ford Flathead out, and they put Miller engines in them, and they were really competitive cars.
Yeah, really competitive cars they were. And we're going back to times when you talk about the oval race, the Indianapolis 500 as well. This was board racing, wasn't it? So precursor to kind of, well, tell us about it. I mean, you know all of this.
Yes, the car behind me, this would have raced on a wooden board track. Frank Lockhart, who raced this particular car on a wooden board track in Beverly Hills, in Culver City, in New Jersey. Now these board tracks were very short-lived. Some were a mile long, some were 2 miles long. Millions of boards of lumber to make these things. Some were banked quite steep. And they turned out to just be too deadly dangerous. The motorcycles were running on them and the cars. This is the early 20s. There were so many deaths. And then, of course, the Great Depression hits, and they kind of just start falling apart. And then people realize, you know what, it's safer on dirt and pavement, so let's just not do the board track again.
And what I love as well, and I learned this, I think, last time I was at a historic over here, spectators, kids probably who couldn't afford to get in, back in the day, there would be sometimes gaps in the boards. And to get the best view in the house, what did the kids do?
Well, after some of these tracks started falling apart and were in disrepair, there'd be holes in the track, you know, about the size of a small head. So these kids were going underneath, popping their head up like a whack-a-mole game, you know, and they'd duck back down before the car came. I mean, it was a giant wall of death. You know, there's a reason they call it as the wall of death.
And then, like you say, the Depression came along, and apparently the lumber was getting stripped from the tracks, and you know, that's all history. But what is it about these cars that got you interested in it, and how did you become interested in it?
Well, as growing up as an automotive lover, you know, you kind of climb a ladder. You find, let's say, a stock car and you fix it up. Then let's say you want to build a hot rod or a race car and you fix that up. And you start, you know, growing an appreciation for machine work, for design, because you're fixing your own car. And then suddenly you come across a Miller, and it's like something from another planet. Yeah. You know, it's the most refined, perfect vehicle that a person could ever make. And so I think you don't come out the gate appreciating Millers. You kind of work up to it.
That's fantastic. And I love your story, and we've chatted a couple of times now, so I know this. I don't think you mind me saying, you're into restaurants normally, so cars is kind of like a passion project, but you left school, opened a cafe, and now here we are. You're a car owner.
I did. Well, it's all based around history. I mean, I love history, and all of my restaurants and bars are vintage. Some of them are landmark restorations. We have a 1927 bowling alley that we restored. We have a giant hot dog called Tail of the Pup, which we just recently restored and reopened. So, you know, what I do with the restaurants really carries over to what I've done with cars my whole life. It's just fixing up old stuff.
Fixing up old stuff. Let's just keep talking about old stuff for a moment or two, because we were over by the Ragtime Racers this morning, talking about fixing up old stuff. Those Ragtime Racers are doing a great thing, aren't they?
They are. I think I saw your twin brother there. I think I talked to him.
James Harrison the first.
Yes. He's a great chap. Those guys are really keeping history alive. There's so many great stories to tell, and this is what we are. We're storytellers. The Ragtime Racers, the Harry Miller Club, you know, the Volkswagen Club, whatever it is, you're keeping a beautiful part of American history alive and worldwide history that's appreciated by everyone in the world. That's the greatest thing of, you know, America from the turn of the century into the 60s. We created some of the most incredible things on earth. You know, from music to architecture to clothing and cars, great style, and I love just keeping it alive. I don't want it to ever die.
I think it's really important, and I love hearing that as well. And you're one of a few younger guys that I've seen here this weekend, and younger as well. Spoke to a great English lad over there, Horatio. What was his name? Horatio Fitzsimon, racing in a Lotus 26. There is a generation of people for whom, thankfully, are coming into this. And you're in the business of keeping it alive, because it's really important, isn't it? We need people coming through to look after these for the next 20 years.
It's very important. It's an incredible history, and I hope that by what I do, I inspire other young people to do it, and I love being inspired by others as well. So if we can just keep inspiring each other, we'll keep it alive.
Brilliant. Listen, Bobby, thanks ever so much. A pleasure talking to you. When we chatted yesterday, we held this man away from a glass of wine at the Sip and Savor Wine Pavilion, but I think you're safe to say you're going to be there before last orders today, so thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.
Right, Johnny, listen, back to you in the commentary booth. How about that? What great cars. The Miller cars from back in the day looking absolutely exquisite. I know you would love them.